Welcome to the Numerical Tarot. A new tarot paradigm. An alternative to tradition. An axial system of archetypal crystallography. A transculturally anthropomorphized, life-biased binary influence calculator. A wisdom system and archetype enhancer, with harmony of interpretation throughout. The content of all the videos in this series are excerpts, edits and brief summaries from the eBooks All Things Are Numbers and All Things Are Patterns, links below. For a more complete explanation of each idea, additional reading might be helpful. Hopefully the basic ideas come across enough to pique your interest in trying this alternative approach to tarot. Like the video previous to this one on the absentia, these two videos about engrayment might seem a bit weird to watch if you haven't watched the videos that precede it. If this video has been suggested for you out of the blue by the YouTube algorithm, that is unfortunate. You can try it anyway. It's not all that weird. If it is, just go back a few videos and try it again later. For those who have been following along to this point, let's get into it. As we continue to explore the spiritual tone that seems to come from a logical study of patterns in nature, the question of how one gets their mind to a place that can know these things becomes important. Instructions and recipes for enlightenment are many and varied. Lots of people engage in philosophical and cosmological discussions and debates about the nature of our existence with one critical assumption in mind, that humans value life. Such an idea seems so fundamental that it is often never questioned. But what about those humans who don't value life? What kind of ideas can we generate by detaching ourselves from all notion of life-threatening consequence? In the video about the absentia, it is suggested that paradox is the ultimate cosmic force behind any universe, and as such is necessarily detached from that universe. So, to know that force, we must detach from our universe of life and death. On a human level, letting go of everything human sounds suicidal. For most people, such an idea tends to go against every fiber of their being. On the other hand, many of life's biggest questions seem most easily answerable when we eliminate our value for life from the equation. When things in life are seen to be completely inconsequential, anything is possible. When anything is possible, without consequence to humans, answers to life's big questions are easy to come by. It is with this one simple concept at hand that we see so many spiritual philosophies put forth ideas that tend to devalue or even vilify our human form and conscious minds, in favor of alleged transcendence to a detached realm of unity that is supposedly divine. By conflating human notions of happiness with divine notions of unity, these spiritual philosophies convince us that the grass is greener over there. This leads to a dilemma, as we mortal humans wrestle with the idea of divine unity not being as much of a paradise as advertised, versus dealing with the dualistic nature of a human existence filled with questions rooted in wants and needs, good and bad, right and wrong, true and false, illusion and reality, happiness and sadness, sanity and insanity, and an intrinsic value for life. Are things like good and bad a learned response? Are the smiles and frowns of life an evolutionary mistake that has led us away from the utopia of unity and oneness where, presumably, by logical extension, there are no smiles and no frowns? In the pursuit of this utopia, should we eliminate all smiles and frowns from our lives, along with the good and bad feelings, like love and hate, or happiness and sadness, that they point to? Some spiritual philosophies suggest that we do. Some spiritual philosophies see every smile or frown, and the subsequent establishment of likes and dislikes that commonly accompany them, as the source of life's misery. So, inasmuch as many view the natural-born instincts of most humans as the source of all misery, it's not hard to understand why some feel compelled to drive people away from any acknowledgement of such things, and shepherd them toward the utopian simplicity of unity. But are the smiles and frowns of humans really the source of all misery? Something is going on here with regards to the liberating effects of devaluing life and thereby eliminating all notions of consequence. At the same time, there is something to the human aspects of life that needs to be acknowledged. When we acknowledge human life as valuable, things like good and bad, right and wrong, true and false, illusion and reality become important. When we devalue human life and convince ourselves that nothing in life matters, things like good and bad, right and wrong, true and false, illusion and reality lose all significance. Why? And which path, as humans, should we follow? If we accept some of the more popular notions of things like reincarnation, then transcendence to the unity of nothingness leads right back to the duality of everythingness. So a clear understanding of the nature of both these realms would be in order, because they are both inescapable. Together, the unity of no differentiation and the duality of binary differentiation create a loop of reincarnation that resembles a Mobius band, where things are both meaningless and meaningful at the same time. As far as the study of consciousness being presented everywhere in this study is concerned, the force that gives the Mobius band its twist of paradox is the absentia, the only form of unity that gets us off the wheel of reincarnation. People devoted to the goal of unity will use the infinite subjectivity of good and bad to convince people that there is no such thing as good and bad, and that to think that there is misguided and unenlightened, or bad. But then, the unenlightened will inevitably beg the question that logically follows, which is to ask whether or not that is an endorsement for the abandonment of all the rules and laws that go along with our notions of good and bad. If nothing matters, then I can do whatever I want, without consequence, and no one should ever care. But we do care. Why? Is it really just because we are all unenlightened lower beings? Or is it because, in the world of living, mortal humans, things matter? In the world of unity, where there is no differentiation between things, nothing matters, because nothing happens. In my opinion, this is the mistake that most people make, when they try to live a life of unity, where nothing matters, within the physical and conscious realm of duality that goes with being a living, breathing human, where things do matter. When the concepts of unity are mixed together or conflated with the concepts of duality, contradictions result between incompatible worldviews or reference frames of context. This is the dilemma we face: the unified theory, where there is no good or bad, and the binary theory, where there is good and bad, are equally valid, depending on the state of our existence and consciousness along a twisted path of realities that would appear to be incompatible to each other. Equally valid incompatibility is the nature of paradox and the absentia. With that in mind, I would suggest that, if transcendence to unity is the goal, enter that context and be as cold, indifferent, detached, non-existent, and non-manifest as possible. In other words, stop being so human. If manifest existence is the game, enter that context and react to things, and struggle to define the many variables of good and bad, right and wrong, true and false, and love and hate, to understand what being a good person is in this manifest, conscious life, and what a good life means. In other words, go ahead, be human. Be human, or stop being so human. We are always both, but we can only express one incompatible state at a time. So, to be enlightened, in unity, while in a mortal state, in duality, live life like a tarot fool. In some decks, the fool is shown heading for, or stepping off of a cliff, to symbolize the indifference he has to any notion of consequences. He knows that nothing in life matters. Life and death are meaningless. Live, die, whatever, he doesn't care, because nothing matters. So when someone tells an enlightened tarot fool that he is about to die, they should not expect that fool to show much concern. The enlightened tarot fool will not grieve. The enlightened tarot fool will simply say "oh well," and walk away, or give a blank stare and say nothing, like the idiot all we unenlightened humans perceive him to be. Thus, to find the most enlightened people on earth, look for those who are completely detached, the imperturbable. These are the ones who are truly neutral, dispassionate, indifferent, and don't care about the outcome of anything. Those who are truly detached are the ones who are either the most enlightened or have the greatest potential for achieving enlightenment of all of us. They don't celebrate highs and don't fret over the lows. They don't sing in the choir and they don't cry at funerals. They abstain from indulgence in life. The ones who are detached are the ones who will say "so what" when death comes knocking. Because, to the tarot fool, anyone who talks about a love of life is expressing a bias of love over hate that prevents them from being detached enough to be considered enlightened. Only someone who does not love, or hate, could be considered enlightened, for to move one tiny step off of a neutral center is to live in the world of dualities that so many consider the root of all suffering. Or, to borrow from the ancient wisdom of the past, when love and hate are both absent, or, as this study of consciousness would call it, in absentia, the way is clear. Step away from that center and return to the evils of duality and humanity. Neither hate nor love. Only when love and hate are both absent, or, in absentia, does the great way become clear. For most people, giving up either love or hate is next to impossible. Some might declare giving up hate to be doable. But to also abandon love. Why? Why would anyone want to do that? For many, abandoning love might make the whole idea of enlightenment seem somewhat undesirable. Infinite neutrality of thought, action, state and emotion is not easy for a living breathing mortal human interacting with other living breathing mortal humans in a flawed world of binary dualities. But, clearly, the only way to achieve infinite neutrality of duality is to detach from everything to an infinite degree, i.e., stop being so human. But is this really the best prescription for finding divinity? Clearly, to experience divine unity, we need to transcend beyond all human notions of wants and needs, good and bad, right and wrong, true and false, illusion and reality, happiness and sadness, sanity and insanity, and love and hate. The force that gets us off the wheel of reincarnation and out of our world of duality is the absentia. In the absentia, there is no love or hate. There is no black or white. The absentia is gray. The absentia is neutral. The absentia is where we achieve infinite neutrality of duality. So, if what most people call God, or he whose name shall not be uttered, is the absentia, then God is not good, God is not light, God is not love. God is beyond all that. Which means, the light of God, as seen within the concepts of paradox and unity held by the absentia, is, at best, gray. Thus, the blinding white light that many associate with God is probably more accurately defined as the light of life. God giveth and God taketh away, with complete and utter neutrality, in absolute absentia to all of life and death. So, in at least one manner of thinking, it is life, not God, that is light. And death, not God, that is darkness. While God is in fact gray. Thus, divinity is beyond love. Divinity is beyond hate. That is the way. As mentioned, many attempt to avoid the seemingly hostile notions of indifference that result from absolute neutrality of duality by suggesting that God is in fact all about love, a special kind of love that is not the same as our human notions of possessive love, and miraculously, has no opposite special kind of hate to oppose it. But while this special contingency might give comfort to those who are not able to completely detach from their addiction to opposites, it seems like delusional conflating. This kind of denial of the essence of divinity seems like a demonstration of how good people are at lying to themselves to get what they want out of a spiritual philosophy. We can say that God is both love and hate. Or, we can say that God is neither love nor hate. But to say that we transcend love and hate, only to encounter a better form of love, but not hate, seems fundamentally unbalanced. I think the reason humans reach this kind of conclusion is because of an ultimate inability to let go of their humanness, coupled with an unsquelchable desire to end the path of their spiritual quest on a note that promises to be more popular with the majority than would an end rooted in neutral indifference. If given a choice, most people would probably prefer a God of love over a God of neutral indifference. But I feel as though manipulating the apparent geometry of divinity in order to get such a result amounts to denial, and a giving in to a desire for something to be the way we want, rather than the way it really is. Who wants a spiritual philosophy with an ultimate God force that is absent and indifferent? Not many, that's for sure. Most people want to think that their spiritual quest is going to culminate with something really, really good. But, clearly, that too is an obvious imbalance of thought, based on human wants, desires and needs whose influence should have been shed long ago, by any serious initiate. Being needy is human. Being indifferent is divine. So I say, emit all the love possible, as a human in this world. Look for things that are really, really good, as a human in this world. But don't make the mistake of imposing that bias upon the sacred geometry of divinity, the way so many do. It may not be a popular alternative, but I say, like the verse just mentioned, we have to move beyond love and hate to find divinity. It would be my opinion that clear distinctions ought to be made between the needs of humans who value life, and those who have detached from that component of binary thinking, in pursuit of divinity. To conflate the two is a misleading mistake, perhaps the biggest and most common mistake any of us make when it comes to our pursuit of knowledge concerning divinity. In fact, in many ways pursuing divinity is itself a mistake. Divinity is not really to be pursued, only acknowledged. Or, let's say pursued until acknowledged, then no longer pursued, but acknowledged. Or as an ancient Zen saying puts it, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. In this study of consciousness and our fictional, invented universe, God is gray. Meaning, if abandonment of opposites leads to divinity, then neutrality is divine, and God is gray. Actually, to be perfectly precise, God would also be beyond gray, but inasmuch as we seek to find evidence of the absentia, looking to gray would be considered more accurate to the idea of infinite neutrality of duality than any other color. The absentia is one step beyond. It is ineffable. It cannot be spoken about, including right here and now, in this video, without diluting its true nature of absentia. Thus, the color gray becomes one of many methods of clothing the ineffable. To me, the things we use to clothe the absentia are more like cans of metaphorical paint being poured over the invisible ineffableness to metaphorically see where it is, and how it isn't, at least for the duration of any particular discussion. In this way, we clothe the absentia with language, using the word absentia. We clothe the absentia with color, using the color gray. We clothe the absentia with logic, using the logic of paradox. We clothe the absentia physically, using the topographical paradox of a Mobius strip. In this particular instance, the color gray doesn't convey the notion of paradox as much as a Mobius strip or logic and language, but it comes a lot closer than the dualities of either white or black alone, thus it is usable as something with which to clothe the ineffable. We aspire to divinity, but we live in humanity. We aspire to unity, but we live in duality. We aspire to the absentia, but we live in the universe. At the same time, paradoxically, divinity and humanity, unity and duality, absentia and universe are all one. Thus, I would consider it misguided for anyone to abandon any one of these states for another at any time. They are interdependent in every way, while at the same time being incompatible. Through paradox, the opposites of duality and singularity are one. Therefore, we should not conclude failure if we exhibit signs of being human while pursuing divinity. As the Saint T.S. quote states, the great way is only clear when love and hate are both absent, and that to make the smallest distinction between love and hate is to set heaven and earth infinitely apart. These are wise words, but hard for many to accept. Because, when love and hate are both absent, the way may be clear, but at some cost to our sense of humanity. Conversely, when love and hate are both present, we are at least human, but at some cost to our sense of divinity. Like life on a Mobius strip, we have a sense of being one-sided, divine, and two-sided, human, at the same time. And like life on a Mobius strip, untwisting the twisted part only twists what was untwisted. And so also like life on a Mobius strip, the two are interminably unresolvable. They will perpetually coexist in endless torment to each other. Given this state of affairs, it is obvious that we will feel less trapped in divinity, knowing that the smallest distinction will make heaven and earth infinitely apart, as we will in our humanity knowing that duality separates us from the divine. Thus, we should not bind the self to either, but bond the self to both, through paradox. In paradox, there is no one without two, and no two without one. So, to abandon two-ness for oneness is as misguided as abandoning oneness for two-ness. Thus making a life lived only in oneness as much of a prison as a life lived only in two-ness. In other words, the grass is not greener over there. If the great way is only clear when love and hate are both absent, or in absentia, what is the core of divinity? What is the core of humanity? Can divinity and humanity get along? Or do we have to abandon one for the other? In addition to the topographical paradox of a Mobius strip, I think an answer to this question might be found through our observation of the optical illusion known as Necker's cube. A two-dimensional wireframe drawing of a transparent cube that, because of its ambiguous lack of monocular visual cues, allows our minds to see either of the six sides as forward or behind the others. Keep staring at one of these cubes and eventually, the side that looks like it is coming forward will suddenly look like it's the one behind. Like the Mobius strip with its two sides that are actually one, or one side that is actually two, the sides of a Necker's cube present an interminably unresolvable duality that is in actuality a unity. By presenting something that can be viewed as equally valid in either of two ambiguous ways, we duplicate the conditions of divinity and humanity or unity and duality being equally valid viewpoints that are mutually exclusive to each other. But the condition that speaks most emphatically to the dilemma at hand is how we, living, breathing, mortal humans, are not able to view both of these equally valid options at once. When we stare at a Necker's cube, one face comes forward for a while. Then, the other face comes forward for a while. Then, back again. This then becomes a visual analogy for the condition of divinity being human and humanity being divine, but not both being both. Divinity and humanity are two aspects of the same thing. Our human perceptions might limit how well we resolve the exclusivity between them. And we may argue to the end of time about which face ought to be forward of the other, or which one is more important at which time, or in which context. But ultimately they are the same thing. The core of divinity is humanity and the core of humanity is divinity. Divinity and humanity are mutually exclusive expressions of the same thing. The Necker's cube illusion is a good way of illustrating that point. Here is a mandala with another very popular optical illusion at its center that can also be used to illustrate the idea of humanity and divinity being interdependent in a mutually exclusive way. Does the circle in the center enclose two faces looking at each other, or a goblet? By illustrating the interdependence of black, white and gray, or the duality of humanity and the unity of divinity, we see that abandonment of opposites does not lead to divinity. We learn that the trick to finding the elusive grail of divinity is in using opposites to see the infinite neutrality of duality, which leads directly to divinity. This mandala suggests that we deal with the dualities of humanity rather than choose upsides or run from them both as if they were both evil. It suggests that we embrace them both, use them both, and master them both, for the purpose of finding a kind of unity that expresses a full and complete spectrum of possibilities between humanity and divinity. Thus it is that in this holy grail of Gray mandala, the elusive grail, or grail, of divinity cannot be found without the use of opposites. Just like the Mobius band that is in fact a one-sided piece of paper that could not happen without the two-sided piece of paper that creates it. People who focus too much on one opposite in fear or revulsion of the other, like those who hunker down in love, will not see the grail, they will only see the light face, while living in denial and or fear of the other face. Those who abandon both opposites as undesirably human will not see it, their view will be filled with nothing but gray. Only those who master opposites and neutrality together will see it. Then, and only then, the lines of magnetic, transcendent, radiance will flow through that grail, or grail, like an endless fountain of divinity. Each one of us is that grail, another reason so few ever find it. Only when the universe flows through us in this exact way are we ever truly divine in our human skin. Only by using duality to find unity can we make humanity and divinity into one all-inclusive sanctuary. Thus, through duality, unity and paradox, we build a sanctuary we don't have to go anywhere to find. No escape necessary. No greener grass over there. We can grow where planted. Be here now. See verse 47 of Tao Te Ching. Without going outside, one can know the whole world. Without looking out a window, one can see the ways of heaven. The further one goes, the less one knows. Thus the sage does not go, yet he knows. He does not look, yet he sees. He does not do, yet all is done. Okay, that's enough for now. Stay tuned for part 2. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Hope it all made sense. Links to eBooks, decks and merchandise below. And, if anyone is interested in drawing a deck based on this system of organization, don't hesitate to contact me for a collaboration.